Alrighty, so I call this meeting of the Canmore Planning Commission to order, and I apologize in advance. In my first chair duty, I'll probably stumble a few times. That's okay, we're all human. So the first item on our agenda is for the board to elect a vice chair for the term. Riley, you might want to sit for another minute while we do this. You are raring to go. Okay, so I'll ask board members if there are any nominations for a vice chair.
I'll nominate.
Oh yeah, and use your mics, please.
I'll nominate. Brian Talbot will nominate Tanya Faubert.
Okay. Tanya Faubert are there any other nominations? No? Okay. Tanya Faubert has been nominated for vice chairperson. Do you accept this nomination?
I do.
Whoa. Alrighty, those in favor? A show of hands, please. And that is carried unanimously. Way to go, Vice Chair Faubert. And it even rhymes. Okay, so before adopting the agenda, I will now ask each member of Town's administration in attendance today to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Riley Weldon. I'm a development planner with the town and project manager.
Good afternoon. This is Lauren Miller. I'm the manager of planning and development with the town of Canmore.
Hi there, I'm Jolene Noel, and I'm the secretary for Canmore Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you, everyone. My name is Whitney Smithers. I'm the general manager of municipal infrastructure, and I will be the chair for this hearing. And all questions and comments shall be directed through the chair. And I'll ask the board members to introduce themselves at this time, starting with Vice Chair Faubert.
I am Councillor or Deputy Mayor Tanya Faubert.
I'm Miranda Spessot, and I'm a public representative.
Brian Talbot, public representative.
Florian Youngen, public representative.
Councillor Jeff Hillstead.
Thank you all. So to the secretary, are there any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda as provided today?
There are none.
Okay, thank you. So I will move that the commission adopt the agenda as presented. Those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Next, we'll go to the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any, to the secretary and the commission, are there any additions, deletions, or changes to the minutes of October 26th, 2022?
There are there are none.
Councillor Faubert.
I would just note that Terry Birch is B-U-R-C-H.
Oh, on the top of the second page there. Yeah.
Noted, thank you. I'll make that amendment.
I have experience with spelling names. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I will move the commission approve the minutes of October 26th, 2022 as amended with the spelling of Mr. Birch's last name. Those in favor? All right, also carried unanimously. And I have like alerts number 6 and 7 on my phone. Okay, so the process this afternoon will be as follows. First, administration will present the matter before the commission, and then commission members can ask questions of clarification of administration. At the commission's discretion, we may ask the applicant to make a presentation on their application. If we do so, that maximum time allotted would be 5 minutes. And we can ask questions of the applicant. And then at the commission's discretion, and if there's anyone in the gallery, a public member wishing to speak, you'll be able to speak for a time of 3 minutes. And again, the commission can ask questions of clarification. And I will just remind the audience that all communication is to be respectful and on topic of the application. So with that, the development officer can now make their presentation on the application.
Great. Thank you, and good afternoon, CPC members. I'm here to present to you development permit PL 2022-0305, which is an application for a 98-unit visitor accommodation at 1736 Bow Valley Trail. I'm going to start with the location context of the site. You'll see an aerial photo on your screen, and I'll see, hopefully you can see my cursor here. So it is highlighted, the site is highlighted. It is an undeveloped site that fronts onto Bow Valley Trail at the north entrance of town. The site is unique in that there is a large area of road right-of-way that is undeveloped and forested in front of the parcel. And if you can follow my cursor here, you can see it. This is the forested area between Bow Valley Trail and the actual property boundary here. It is across from McDonald's on Bow Valley Trail, Esso, and Tim Hortons. And currently, there is, as you can see on the screen, a 101-unit visitor accommodation that is currently being developed that is directly east of the proposed development. The development site is part of a larger parcel that was subdivided into 2 fee simple parcels and as well as 2 municipal reserve parcels last year. And the subdivision is currently with land titles for registration. And I'll just point those out. So the one parcel is, of course, the parcel that we're talking about here today, which is highlighted. The second parcel is the one that's currently being developed with the other visitor accommodation. There is a municipal reserve to the east of that, and then this triangle parcel here that's closer towards the visitor center is also going to be the municipal reserve parcel. This is a photo looking northwest along Bow Valley Trail. As you can see, again, this is the treed area in front of the site that's within the Bow Valley Road right-of-way. And there's also a cleared area that you can kind of see behind here, behind the pine tree. This is the cleared area. This is where the site has been cleared in preparation for the development. This next slide is the applicant's rendering looking northwest from Bow Valley Trail. The development proposes a single building of 73 units of visitor accommodation with 25 lock-off suites. This image also shows a new sidewalk that will be provided along the front of the site. Although the rendering isn't 100% accurate, it does show the sidewalk that will allow for different speeds of travel for both pedestrians and for cyclists. And you can see that here in front. The proposed development aligns with the policies of the Bow Valley Trail Area Redevelopment Plan, as well as the town's municipal development plan, specifically for commercial hotel development with an entrance that is oriented to the street. It proposes the intensification of an underutilized site as well. Vehicle parking is provided through 30 vehicle stalls, and that's to the northwest of the site here. Those are the surface stalls, and 68 underground parkade stalls. 24 short-term bicycle parking stalls are provided on the site, as well as 36 long-term stalls within a bike storage room within the building. There's also potential for an additional 73 stalls through storage lockers, and those are located within the parkade should the guests choose to use them. Overall, the proposed building does a fairly good job of conforming with the community architectural and urban design standards and aligns with the Rocky Mountain architectural character. Some of the key elements of the design aesthetic are the steeply pitched roofs, having the top floor built into the roof, having a distinct base, middle, and top, and appropriate detailing. This includes the use of relief and texture in the building facades, as well as the acceptable color palette. There's also an entrance oriented to the street and are also important factors to consider. The application requires 3 variances, one to building height, one to Eaveline height, and one to the front yard setback. The first is a proposed variance to building height. A portion of the building is proposed at 16.85 meters as opposed to the 16 meters required by the land use bylaw. However, in this district, a special variance provision is included to consider higher roofs and eavelines where certain conditions are met. So in the case of building height, up to 20% of the building may be over the maximum building height, to a maximum of 20%. And this is where the architectural integrity of the building would be enhanced. 16.7% of the roof is located over the maximum building height and therefore conforms to this variance provision. The area over the building height consists of a steeply pitched roof, which enhances the architectural character of the building. And this is shown by the red line. So you can see on the red line here, the portion of the roof that is over the height. And it mainly includes here the peaks of the roof pitches. Overall, the building does a good job of meeting the criteria established, and administration is supportive of the variance. The second proposed variance is to Eaveline Height. The Eaveline is shown at 8.8 meters as opposed to the 7 meters required by the land use bylaw. Again, this district includes a special variance provision to consider higher roofs as well as eavelines where certain conditions are met. In this case, consistency with the intent of the massing and scale section of the architectural guidelines needs to be adhered to. Overall, the building does a good job of meeting the criteria established within the land use bylaw by breaking the building up with numerous architectural design elements and details. And this is shown on the elevation on this slide. As a result, administration is supportive of this variance. The last variance is to the required 2-meter front setback. The regulation requires that a minimum of 20% of a building be located at the 2-meter front yard property line, or front yard setback from the property line. The purpose of this standard is to ensure buildings are located at the front of the property to create a pedestrian-oriented and friendly environment. The building is located between 2.13 meters and 4.33 meters, with 24% of the building being located close to the 2.13 meter setback. Administration is supportive of this variance as the intent of the regulation is still being met. And this area is highlighted in blue on this slide, and as you can see, the building is oriented and quite close to the front property line. Clause 1.14.1.6 establishes that as the condition for a variance, the development must meet the Town of Canmore enhanced green construction requirements. To meet that requirement, the applicant has suggested that they will achieve an improvement of 10% better than the National Energy Code of Canada for buildings, reference building. They are proposing a solar installation that will include communication about this initiative in the hotel lobby through screens as well. The condition of approval has been proposed regarding the energy efficiency commitment, and that's outlined in Schedule A. There are a couple other specific issues listed as conditions of approval in Schedule A as well. The first are requirements for visitor accommodation developments, and that is intended to discourage the unauthorized use of the property as a residence. The second is requiring the developer to enter into a maintenance and encroachment agreement where infrastructure is proposed to be located within the Bow Valley Trail road right-of-way, as well as the 9-meter waterline right-of-way to the east of the lot. In summary, the application is for a permitted use with the requirements of the land use bylaw and community architectural and design standards being met, with the exception of building height, eaveline height, and front yard setback. Administration's recommendation is to approve the proposed development subject to the conditions proposed in Schedule A. CPC has 3 options to consider on this application. The first is to approve the application subject to the conditions, or in addition to other conditions than those contained in Schedule A. Second, CPC can refuse the application, specifying the planning-related reasons for the refusal. And lastly, CPC can postpone the application pending submission of any additional details requested by the Commission. That concludes my presentation. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Weldon. Are there any questions for the Development Officer, Mr. Talbot?
Mr. Weldon, just a couple of quick questions. I'll start with one. The district regulations 4.6.5.5 speak to the height of land, and planning is amenable to it not being raised. what is happening with the land directly to the east? Is it at the same, will it be at the same level? Okay. In that regard, sorry.
No, that's okay. Sure, sorry, excuse me.
No, it's my fault.
Sure, to answer your first question, through the chair, yes, it is at the same grade. The regulation you're referring to is related to raising the grade of a building to be at the same grade of the actual road surface on Bow Valley Trail. And so this requirement is related similarly to the front setback to create a pedestrian-oriented design and friendly feeling and development. So what that means is you want your buildings to be at the same grade as your street surface, including the sidewalk. So as people walk by, they don't have to go down or up in certain cases into the development. Now, what's unique about this site is that the road right-of-way is quite large, as you've probably noticed. It's about 12.5 meters from the road surface. And so because the property line is so far back from the road surface as well as the proposed and existing sidewalks, that regulation is not as critical to create that pedestrian oriented design and friendly streetscape. It becomes more important as you go down Bow Valley Trail to the east, where those property lines are pretty much abutting the road, either the sidewalks or the road surface itself.
Thank you, that addresses my question. One follow-up question related to that relates to the interface between, because it's dropped down and it's not substantial, I understand. And I noticed this yesterday when I was out at site with it's the interface between Legacy, where the road crosses. When you're coming up from below, I'm just worried about visibility on the pedestrian and bicycle access. And there is no landscape plan in here, so I could not determine if there is, it's an easy fix if there is. If there's trees planted right there, it's going to obscure those pathway areas. And my concern would be, as someone that utilizes that path a fair amount, I was watching people try to get up the little grade hill at the campground to the east. Mm-hmm. They're taking a run at it. I mean, it is slippery right now, so it's a kind of a unique time of year. But I was just concerned about visibility and pathway related to that, because to me, this is all interface between height, grade, approach, setback. They're all kind of tied together. There may not have been a question in there.
No.
Sorry.
No. Fair enough. Yeah, no. Through the chair, yeah, that's an excellent point, and it's a good consideration. And so the road right-of-way, if you, maybe I'll put the site plan back up. If you just, I don't know if I can take, yeah, if it just take a second. Okay, so as you can see, the entrance into the actual site and the parking area, you can see it doesn't show the connection onto Bow Valley Trail. Yeah, but what you're bringing up is a really good and important consideration, because this is the trail and this is the existing road right of way. This road comes up and it goes actually around. Actually, you know what? I'm going to show you another.
There is one in the report. I believe
Yeah.
it tees up with that road I always forget the name of. Ray McBride, there you go.
Ray McBride, exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I'll just zoom in here. Okay. Can everybody see that okay? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, this shows the access into the site. So you're correct. So from the surface of the road down to this surface area, it does drop slightly here. This area is treed, and there is a proposal to retain most of the trees that are going to be within the right-of-way. Now, our engineering folks, when it comes to access onto the road, but also when you're crossing a pathway, there will be a different texture, obviously, of the pathways for both the pedestrian pathway as well as the bike pathway. And the town will ensure that as the vehicles come down and as they come out of the site, that there will be visibility. The town does have standards for sight as vehicles approach the roads, but as well as approaching the sidewalk areas. So there will be the site visibility requirements that will have to be adhered to for the town. One other consideration that I'll actually look into with our engineering folks is the provision of signs, perhaps on the trails. I don't know that offhand right now, but there could be the potential of also having signs at these intersections.
You just triggered another question then, sorry. Once you exit the project, cross the pathway, what's the distance between the pathway and the actual road surface? Is it one car, two car? All I get concerned about is, I mean, these are, again, easy fixes, and you're probably already on it with the development agreement, but if it's a two-car, if you got all of a sudden a bumper or half a car sitting on the pathway and the weekend warriors coming by at a high rate of speed, not paying attention, or little kids or what have you, and that's solely just the interface, and as long as planning's aware of it.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, it's another great consideration is, and so what you're mentioning here is, as vehicles come out of the site, and there's vehicles coming in here, and they may have to wait, and there may be the potential for backup of vehicles here that may cross the trails, causing a blockage. In fact, to be quite honest, when I was running this afternoon at lunch, that happened on one of the trails. There was a vehicle blocking the trail too. So it's a really good consideration, and that is something that we can address through the development agreement, like what you had mentioned, as well as the engineering design that that occurs actually post decision as well. So.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Weldon? Okay, Ms. Bessett?
Just, I guess, on that same note about that intersection there, I noticed on the drawing, it shows that the sidewalk would be a different texture at that intersection. Would there be consideration for also adopting similar treatment for the legacy trail that's existing? It just shows that it's...
Through the chair, in terms of, so what I meant by a different texture was it'll be a different, it'll be likely a different material. So the path won't be the same as the drive aisle coming into the site, right? So it'll likely be the same material as what's being used on the legacy trail currently. So that's just, there would be a difference between the surfaces there. Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification. Another question related to the trees. You indicated that there was the expectation that most of the trees in that area would remain. Is that expected to carry along most of the face of the building as well?
That is correct. That is something that we're currently working with. These trees are within the road right-of-way, and we are working with our parks folks through a tree protection plan to protect the trees within that area.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Oh. Mr. Talbot.
Back to setbacks, thank you. There's a big rail right away. With the variation in the front yard setback, is planning satisfied that they've addressed the applicant has addressed the requirements in regard to that rail setback?
Sure, through the chair. Yeah, that's an excellent question. So there is, in our land use bylaw, there are requirements regarding proximity to the rail right-of-way. So this abuts the rail right-of-way. So one requirement is the provision of fencing, which the applicants are providing fencing along the property line that abuts the railroad. There is also a 30-meter setback requirement from the property line. Now, this setback relates to a distance safety study that the town has undertaken, and for structures that are located adjacent to the rail line, a maximum of 85 meters of building, of a high-density building, which this is considered, can be within that setback area. And so this building proposes underneath the 85 meters. So that requirement is being met, even with the setback being a little bit further in from the front property line.
Okay, Mr. Youngan.
So through the chair, last year, almost exactly this time, CPC reviewed the adjacent development. So I went back and looked at that today, and I actually almost thought I made a mistake because the rendering on the cover of that one is only identical to the one we're reviewing today. So my question is, does administration have a policy or preference for variation architectural between adjacent projects, especially with this kind of large frontage?
Through the chair, yeah, that's a really great question. And so we don't have a specific regulation. We do in other districts. For example, we do have a requirement, I believe, in the TP Town district to require adjacent developments to be different architecturally, have a different architectural design. We don't have that here in this case. So it is the same development group that is building both of these buildings, and they will look like very, very similar, yeah. But they are still meeting our architectural design guidelines. Yeah.
Okay, I had another question. In the staff report, one of the first points that you mentioned in the ARP is the main floor addressing the pedestrian experience, and main floor, I think it says facilitating strong interaction with people on the street, such as hotel entrances. So I noticed that the entrance is on the corner there and does relate to the pedestrian sidewalk somewhat, but generally the ground floor of that building is not particularly pedestrian friendly. I guess administration is not at the point where they would be or wouldn't be able to require like commercial development on the ground floor to animate the street. Is that's not the intention of the ARP to go to that kind of lengths?
Through the chair, yeah, it's another really good point, and we touched on this a bit, given the distance, current distance within the road right-of-way of the property line away from the sidewalk and the legacy trail. I think those are the most important considerations here. Is if the sidewalk and legacy trail were closer to the property line, certainly I think we would administration would have more elements in terms of access directly onto that trail and activating that street. But given the distance away from both Bow Valley Trail and those sidewalks, with that main entrance coming in from the sidewalk for the primary entrance, we've considered that to be adequate in terms of addressing that. Yeah.
Okay, so just one last question through the chair. And this might be getting a little bit outside the realms of this meeting today, but I think there's people in the community who would love to see affordable housing developed in this property. And I note that is a permitted use in the district as well. I think we all know that current economics and legislative framework are stacked against that. I guess to frame it as a question, would council have the authority or ability under the MGA to require commercial developments to provide a certain amount of staff accommodation to sort of offset the employment that they're creating? Is that one way that we could have like a little bit of a mix of commercial and also affordable development?
If I can just, I was going to ask a similar question. So in your answer, can you also speak to whether or not employee housing was discussed as part of this application with the applicant?
Sure. So I'll try to answer the first question. So if I understand it correctly, your question is asking about the town's ability through the Municipal Government Act, through certain tools, perhaps amendments to the land use bylaw or certain other standards or regulations that would require a certain amount or a specific use. So in this case, employee housing or staff accommodation to be included as part of a development. Now, that's a great question. I don't know specifically if the MGA allows those kinds of powers to the municipality. I know municipalities have the ability to regulate land use. I don't know if they have the ability to mandate a land use to occur on a particular property. Now, that's something I'd need to look into and get back to you on. What the town does do, if I can just expand on this a little bit, is that we do provide the option by adding those land uses within the districts themselves to be considered. And so the town has gone to the degree of ensuring that those are listed as land uses to have that ability to include them in the developments themselves. So that's for the first question. So I apologize, I'm not able to answer that directly. But for the second question about whether employee housing was considered, it's not something that was specifically brought up by the town, but I would maybe encourage you to the developer and the applicants here to maybe ask that of them on whether that was something that they had considered. But it wasn't a requirement from the town, through the process.
I'd just like to add, through the chair, we do have some land use districts that do have requirements of matching the commercial development that may be proposed on a site with a certain percentage or proportion of employee housing being provided. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be provided on site, but provided somewhere within the community. So we do have that type of regulation already in place, just not in this particular district.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the development officer? Yes, Ms. Bissett.
Hi. You go first.
Mine's a quick one. I know that the report indicated that there were no public comments received. I'm just wondering if any were received since, I guess, the report was circulated.
Sure. Through the chair, no, we have not received any comments since the development was advertised. And when I say advertised, it was on our website and it was also listed. We require the site to post a development notification sign. And since that's been posted for a number of months, we haven't received any inquiries or comments on the application.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hillstad.
Under the conditions, under the specific conditions, number 9, it just speaks about the development is approved for visitor accommodation use, which is defined by our land use bylaw as a building of groups, or a building or group of buildings not intended for residential use, where sleeping facilities are provided for persons for periods of up to 30 days, and which may also contain a variety of services and amenities for the benefit of the guest. Visitor accommodation development shall provide a central management and reservation service, have a single address for mail, not serve as a residential address for utility building or electoral purposes, and provide signage designated the development as a hotel or similar visitor use. So with that, I'm just curious, are visitor accommodation units still allowed to be sold individually to homeowners, and then basically if we do a central management and reservation service, like just what things do we have in place to basically make sure that the building actually conforms to that and doesn't end up being condominiumized and then just becomes a pure residential use?
Sure, through the chair. Great question. So there's a couple ways that the town ensures. So this condition is directly taken from the land use bylaw. This is the criteria that all visitor accommodations or hotels within the town must meet. And it's in place, these are the requirements that are in place to ensure that it does remain as a visitor accommodation for temporary overnight services, and not as a residence. The land use itself and what is being approved is a visitor accommodation. It is not a residential use. So if it is found that it is being used for a residential use, so longer term, longer than the 30 days, the town, it is no longer in conformance with the approval and with the land use. And so the town has the ability through different enforcement tools such as stop orders and fines to enforce that. But these specific criteria are in place as an extra insurance that it is operating for the temporary visitor accommodation use. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions of the development officer? Okay, thank you, Mr. Weldon. Would anybody prefer a presentation from the applicant? Yes, okay. Applicant, would you?
So, Madam Chair, so I had let the applicant know that a presentation wasn't to be required, but I'm sure that they would be here to maybe provide a brief overview of their application and then answer any questions that you may have.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, because I do have a couple questions.
Okay. Yeah.
Councillor Frobert, I saw you ready to hit the button in it. Oh, we'll have the presentation first. Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair, Commission, Administration. To Riley's point, yes, we were advised that a presentation would not be necessary. However, my name is Chris Sparrow. I'm an architect with MTA Architecture. We are the applicant on behalf of the owner, High Point. Ali is behind me there. He's a member of that team, and we're here and available to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Questions? Anyone? Okay, so I had a question. Did you consider employee housing units in this development? And if not, why not?
So the nature of the evolution of visitor accommodation in the town of Canmore, and very specifically along Bow Valley Trail, is that they're very low labor properties. They don't have 24-hour staff on site, and so the personnel and the people in the community who maintain and turn over properties such as this work on a number of properties. They don't work on a single property. So in that context, you know, if there was a CRU here or something like that where this is where they work specifically, directly and only, it would have been something we may have considered in a bit different way. But because we're typically looking at service providers in the community to turn over these units and maintain the building that already exist and live elsewhere in the community, it wasn't considered. The other thing that we consider when we look at properties specifically at this is the location of it, how far it is from services, how far it is from additional communities. So to build one employee housing unit on a property such as this, so far away from other residential areas and gathering and proper community would, from our perspective, be a challenge from a dignity perspective for those individuals and actually isolate them from other members of the community. And so with that in mind on this property specifically, we discussed it, but we decided not to pursue an opportunity for that.
Okay, Mr. Youngin, did you have a follow-up question?
No, thank you. I think that actually answered my initial question quite well. Thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions of the applicant? Yes, Ms. Bessa.
I just wanted to get a bit more information on the particular variances that are helping achieve this particular design, and I'm wondering if any other options were considered that were fit within the existing requirements.
Through the chair, is there a specific variance of the three, or?
I think more so the height and the eave-line. I can see from the rendering that the property line seems to curve a little bit, which I imagine is contributing to the variation in the setback, but mainly those first two.
Yes, absolutely. You're correct. We did, in our initial studies, look at jogging the foundation of the building and the projection of the front elevation to accommodate and meet the intent of the bylaw. One of the challenges that we face on these sites on this side of Bow Valley Trail is that, as was mentioned earlier, they are lower than the grade of the road. And so part of what we have to do within a very small amount of space on our site, 2 meters, is handle the stormwater that comes off our building. But we also have to make sure that the stormwater that comes off of the road is handled appropriately on the town's land. So it gives us a very small amount of area to do that across a very long frontage. And so what we endeavor to do is make sure that we can do that successfully to mitigate the risk of water damaging the building. So in this case, we did look at it. It caused us some pressures at the front in the center of the building. So we elected to apply for a variance to mitigate that risk.
And is there any particular information to that, I guess, same effect that could be provided to explain the height variances?
Yes, it was mentioned earlier that there was an application last year that came through from the same developer and from our team as an applicant that's a very similar building. And so one of the things that we talked about with planning when we started on this one is we made note that it would be in the same family, but it would have some differences. And one of the differences that we looked at was we wanted to have the peaks on this building and the gables pop out higher than the ridge line beyond to give it a slightly different type of gentle articulation at the top of the building. To differentiate it from the other one.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions of the applicant? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to note for CPC that if there are specific considerations, I know there's been a bit of discussion about the pathway and signage and things of that nature. If the Planning Commission feels strongly about some of those elements, you can amend the Schedule A conditions to add whatever elements you feel are necessary for you to support the application going forward. So I just wanted to remind CPC members that they do have that authority.
Okay, and are there any other closing remarks or comments from administration?
None at this time, Madam Chair, no.
All right, thank you. So I believe now we need a motion on the, right? To start our debate, yeah. Yes. So does anybody want to make one? Okay.
I move that the Planning Commission approve development permit application PL 2022-0305, 1736 Bow Valley Trail. You want me to say it all? Okay. That sounded like it was part of it, but I switched right to you. Awesome. I'll speak to that since I made the motion. I'm really appreciative of the applicants speaking to the rationale behind the variances that they were seeking. These variances align with the variance requirements or parameters set out in the bylaws. And this site is located within a commercial zone, so visitor accommodation is, I think, an appropriate use here. So I will support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Faubert. Does anybody else want to speak to the motion? Councillor Hillstead.
I also support that motion. Again, the variances that have been asked for, they have good rationale behind them. There's clauses within the land use bylaw that allow for those variances. So I think they all fall in quite well. Has been noted, there is a bit of an articulation at the front of the building, so it does make it trickier without reshaping the building to keep it within that front yard setback. So I think all the variances that have been asked for are within manageable lines, and they make sense, so I will support it.
Thank you. Mr. Talbot.
I will support the motion from Councillor Faubert. I take it based on the comments from Mr. Weldon that administration is aware of the concerns related to pedestrian safety, as is the applicant, and will ensure that reasonable measures are taken to address those concerns. I don't believe there's a need for any conditions specific to that. We'll take administration at their word. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Okay, so we have a motion in front of us to approve the application as presented. All in favor? Okay, it's carried unanimously. Thank you all. Now I have to put to I think there is no other planning business on the agenda. So when is our next scheduled meeting?
The next scheduled meeting is March 30th, and I just got confirmation today that we do not have any applications going, so you can wait to hear from me if we have anything for the April 26th scheduled meeting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, then, I move the commission adjourn the March 1st. How did it become March? The March 1st Canmore Planning Commission meeting. Those in favor? And again, carried unanimously. Thank you very much.